The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Very big news from the world of genetically modified food. The only study that linked GMOs with cancer has now been retracted, Lewis. Ryan sent me the story via takepart.com, also supporting information from a businessweek.com article. And Ryan said, as most people know, there's a huge organic food movement as well as a movement to label our food, both of which I support wholeheartedly. But I have to admit that those who wish to prove that GMO foods cause cancer still don't have much proof to back up that claim. Of course, it doesn't mean GMO foods do or do not cause health problems. So with inconclusive evidence, many people make their decisions based on belief rather than information. Do you have any thoughts on this? Absolutely. Lewis, we've talked for a while about absolutely we need to label GMOs. Huge campaign from big food corporations to fight against that. They spent a lot of money on that. We've talked about the problems with copyright on crops and seeds and patents and how much of a problem this causes for small farmers. Now, though, we do need to look specifically at this. And the widely publicized study, which was published about a year and a few months ago by Food and Chemical Toxicology, attracted a lot of criticism right away. And that was before it was retracted last week. It was a 2-year study, and it used 10 rats for the research. And it turns out that the species of rat that was used is known to develop cancerous tumors regardless of its diet, basically saying you had a type of rat that could have developed cancers no matter what you fed them. And in addition, your sample size was only 10. And the study has been discredited, Lewis. There is more information. We could dig into more details, but that's the essential important part. Now, some have reached out to me in addition to Ryan, who sent me the story, saying, hold on, the entire discrediting of that study has been funded and supported by big food companies like Monsanto. I was not able to find that information. And the most important thing for me here, Lewis, is the following. Part of being an activist and a progressive is pushing for change and for progress where it is needed. And you have to be careful not to do the same when it is not needed or backed up by science, because it is kind of like the boy who cried wolf. That is the effect. So, Lewis, I'm open to the idea that GMOs are bad for people's health. The most widely cited study that linked GMO consumption to cancer, has now been discredited. So as a progressive, I want to stay in the evidence-based arena when thinking about this.
Right. And I'm sure there are a lot of people trying to figure out if this is harmful or not. But when there's only one study, you have to wonder if it's accurate. And so clearly we have our answer, and it's not surprising to me, but I hope that there are people doing a lot of research on this because it is very important.
If you want to be against GMOs, be against them because you don't like how big agriculture patents crops, patents these GMOs, and makes huge money, sues farmers where 1 or 2 seeds may have inadvertently blown into their field and planted and grown, or be against GMOs if they are unlabeled and push for full labeling of GMOs. But we have to have evidence and data. We had Dr. Church on the program sometime in the last year. I don't remember exactly when, 5-6 months ago. And he said there is also not definitive evidence linking GMOs to health issues from their consumption. So we need more studies, Lewis. We need more data, but let's stay progressive on this, which is making our activism relate to the evidence we have. I don't think that's too much to ask.
No, I think that's fair. And who knows, maybe we can find a way ultimately to have genetically modified food that is perfectly safe. I'm perfectly open to that. I think it's possible.
Progressives and the economy is a topic I want to discuss with you today. We've talked on this program for years about how progressives are generally united on a majority of issues, really, while the Republican Party has these factions or is fractured. Like, for example, you've got the pro-business, low-tax side of the Republican Party, you've got the religious, social conservatives, and then you've got the Tea Party libertarian wing of the Republican Party. And often they have different goals, different priorities when it comes to electing candidates. One area where this is reversed is when it comes to the economy. Broadly speaking, Republicans, regardless of whether they're more libertarian or more on the pro-business side, they are for smaller government, they are for lower taxes, they are for freer trade, and they are for less regulation and getting rid of social programs where possible. There's a really interesting article on Salon.com. It's written by Michael Lind, and it talks about how progressives on this issue of the economy aren't really united, Lewis. You kind of have three wings of progressive labor and work and employment thought. One of these is the small producerism, as Michael Lind writes. This is decentralize, have small farmers, for example, small shopkeepers, small businesses, prevent businesses from getting too big, break very large businesses into smaller ones via antitrust legislation, etc. Then you have unionism, which focuses on, we don't care about corporations being really big or huge even, but we want strong unions to bargain collectively for wages and benefits. And then the third wing of progressive economic thought, in kind of colloquially in the United States right now, is that of economic rights. Legislate policy which addresses the economy. This could be minimum wage. This could be bigger social programs that further labor or supplement benefits to wages, etc. When we look at this, we have to ask, can these three work together? Or do we have some kind of detrimental effect when there is a split message on this? And Michael Lind specifically says, okay, small producerism is great, but we've had a drop in the number of people that consider themselves self-employed from 25% in 1950 to only 7% this year. And a lot of that 7% are retired or very wealthy investors who don't consider themselves who consider themselves self-employed, but really aren't, right? They're just kind of independently wealthy investors. So you're not really reaching a huge portion of the population. What about unionism? Well, in 2012, union membership dropped to its lowest since 1916, 11.3%. Again, if you focus on unionism, you're just not affecting enough people. So Lind argues that direct legislation is really the solution here, Lewis. Insist on a living wage. Talk about Walmart and McDonald's and how they are subsidized by the government in great part. They are not these standalone, self-sufficient wonders of business. Phase out the connection between employer and health insurance and provide a universal government-funded program that includes paid leave, etc. This is very interesting because that really would help, ideally, way more of the population than focusing on unions or small producerism. So, Lewis, I'll open it up to you. Should progressives unite on this front? Is Michael Lind totally wrong in his analysis?
I don't think so, but it's complicated. I mean, if you're just talking about winning elections here and how to advance your goals as a progressive, then, of course, you have to all agree on something. And direct legislation seems fine, but we're also talking about a country where these big companies are getting even bigger, and it's harder to pass legislation that would affect any of these companies in an adverse way.
Well, that's the idea, I think, of direct legislation, which is the small producerism won't work because the companies are huge, and saying let's get rid of big corporations is not going to work. Unionism would not work because most of these big companies don't have union employees in the first place. So the idea is, don't legislate the companies per se. Say, if you are in the business of being in business, you have to do these things, and kind of from a top-down approach, say, these are the rules. This is the basic set of rules you have to play by.
I think that's the only way it can work. I still think it's an uphill battle.
All right, send me your thoughts on this. Should progressives be united on this front when it comes to the economy? Turns out that Obamacare is going to cost, quote, billions of dollars less than originally projected. Talking Points memo is reporting that among the Republican Party's criticisms of the Affordable Care Act, one of the loudest has been the cost, right? This is so expensive. According to one report, Obamacare will not be anywhere near as costly as expected. The New York Times reported that the government is expected to spend billions of dollars less than originally projected on the law. And remember, the original projections themselves were already budget neutral. The adjusted estimate is the result of the law's Medicaid expansion and the subsidies for private insurance plans ending up a lot less costly than initially anticipated. According to the New York Times, economists say the law has also benefited from a weak economy over the last 5 years, during which health spending has slowed dramatically. About 100,000 people signed up for insurance last month using the healthcare.gov portal. Lewis, we now have a situation where the website is working well, or drastically better than it was initially. Costs are projected to be lower than initially expected. People with pre-existing conditions now can get insurance, and these lifetime caps on insurance benefits have been removed. Without a doubt, Lewis, the Affordable Care Act, which doesn't even go into effect for another month, is not going to be this epic failure of biblical proportions that the American right has been kind of fear-mongering around.
Right. Probably not. Hopefully not. There still could be some issues when it comes to, let's see, just the minutia of making sure people get their money and the transactions and
No
the
question.
communication. But hopefully that all goes smoothly as well.
Yeah, and remember, Republicans are the barometer for how Obamacare is doing can never be whether Republicans say it's working or not, because some Republicans still maintain Social Security is not working. Some Republicans still maintain Medicare is not working. And these are some of the most popular programs that started with some stutter steps for sure. So Republicans are never going to admit that Obamacare works, ever, ever, ever. We have to try to keep our analysis as close to the data, as close to the facts, and as close to the numbers as we possibly can. Now, on the other hand, on the other side of the Obamacare discussion, the Washington Post has reported that the American right wing has spent $10 million in advertisements to try to convince people not to get insurance. Remember, one of the main tenets, one of the main financial structures upon which Obamacare is based is that in exchange for insuring everybody, not keeping anybody out because of pre-existing conditions, you balance the pool of risk by having an individual mandate that says everyone has to have insurance, regardless of whether you're healthy or not. If you don't have it, you pay a fine. Well, the anti-Obamacare establishment has been pushing young people simply to not get insurance with the idea that it'll make Obamacare unsustainable. $9.7 million were spent during 2013 against Obamacare, and most of it, 9.4 million out of 9.7 million, has been directed at areas where 15 to 30% of the population is uninsured. And it is all designed to keep those people uninsured by choice, Lewis, by choice. And I have to say that a lot of this money, I get the strategy, but a lot of these millions are being thrown away. The Affordable Care Act is the law of the land. It will grow in popularity the way Medicare did 38 years ago. There will be issues, as we've been seeing, but fighting this, Lewis, is essentially useless at this point, and it's actually more evidence that Obamacare will be popular, because if it was going to fail, if it was going to be unpopular, we wouldn't see millions poured into these ads.
Right. And I think that's it. It is working so far. I mean, the projections look good. And I mean, what's the idea here? Tell people don't get insured, just pay the fine, and if you get sick, you're screwed. I think no matter how bright you are, that's not going to make much sense.
I wish you were right, but it actually is making sense to some people. But fortunately, it doesn't appear it's going to be enough people, Lewis, as you're kind of implying, to really take the program down, which is the most important thing. On today's bonus show, we will talk about a 20-month-old signed to a soccer club. We'll also talk about a tale of two men switched at birth, and also a man who breaks out of prison to go to the dentist and then goes back to prison. How do you get the bonus show? Very easy. Become a supporter of the David Pakman Show. davidpakman.com/membership. Sign up, get the bonus show, the commercial-free podcast, TV show, so much stuff, and a lot more coming up today. Stay with us.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Our membership program is made possible in part by liberalbias.com. Liberals think they're so cool with their fancy statistics and math, but conservatives are holding on to numerology. Find out more about using numbers without liberal bias at liberalbias.com. Today's member of the day is Brian Aarons. Brian, thank you for being a David Pakman Show member. We couldn't do any of the things we've done in 2013 without membership support, and it'll be a big part of 2014 as well. Go to davidpakman.com/membership to sign up today. There is a new poll that suggests there might be some good news for Republicans in 2014. It's a CNN ORC poll. It says that a month ago, Democrats had a 50-42 advantage among registered voters in a generic ballot for 2014, which asked respondents, just choose between Democrat and Republican for 2014. Who would you vote for? And this came after congressional Republicans had completely mangled the government shutdown. Now that Democratic lead appears to have disappeared, the latest CNN ORC poll says the Republicans now have a 49 to 47 percent advantage. Only 2 points, certainly within the margin of error, but it is a significant swing from the earlier poll. So this seems to be connected to the Obamacare mess that is going on. Lewis, what do you think? Is this should Democrats be concerned about this? Is this to be expected given the pounding on Obamacare that's happening in corporate media? Does it make any difference? Do they need to get Obamacare and the website and the messaging together in order to prevent a disaster in 2014?
I'm not sure if it's all about Obamacare. I mean, certainly that had an effect on things, but I mean, I think we're in a situation where things still aren't good. And I mean, if you have any type of majority, or depending on who the president is, I mean, well, that party, they're the bad guys, right? So right now we have a Democratic president, and I mean, I guess half of Congress is Democratic majority. So they're the bad guys, right?
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, but I do think that there's no question there has to be some better messaging and PR done around Obamacare and the website, because it is getting close to 2014. We're less than a year. We're 11 months from the 2014 election, and we'll start doing the analysis of what could happen in the House and Senate. We'll get to that later, in 2014. But Democrats, I think, need to improve their messaging. And Lewis, this happened around the 2010 midterm elections, where I said Democrats, and particularly President Obama, have completely dropped the ball on messaging around Obamacare. Not around Obamacare in and of itself, but around the messaging. And I feel like the same thing is happening for 2014. They've got to get the messaging improved and explain to people what is happening.
Right. Well, you know what? The same things happened with the bailouts and some of the government money that was given to corporations that since then has been paid back with interest,
right,
at least in some cases. I mean, the messaging was terrible there, too. And I don't know what it is. I don't know why they're not willing to just go all out to spread this message, but it's probably hurting them. Yeah.
We already knew that Craig Cobb, this white separatist who I interviewed months ago, after finding out that he was 14% black based on a DNA test, was arrested after neighbors in Leith, North Dakota called 911 to report that he and an associate, Keenan Dutton, were threatening and approaching people with guns in an intimidating manner. Craig Cobb is 62 years old. He was arrested and charged with 3 counts of terrorism, according to the Bismarck Tribune. And the incredible thing, Lewis, that's going on is, well, there's 2 things. Number one, Remember this guy, Glenn Miller, the crazy anti-Semite that we interviewed on the show? He's friends with Craig Cobb, and he's been emailing me asking to be on the show. He's like desperate to be on the show. He's saying we're afraid. He's emailing me saying that I'm not willing to have him on because he was so devastating to Jews when he was on. It's amazing the level of just the delusional nature of what he thinks is going on. And I tell him, listen, can you maybe like get us together with like a phone call into jail where Craig Cobb is being held or something, because that would really be interesting. And he's not able to do that apparently. So that's number one, that Glenn Miller is emailing me. I have 5 or 6 emails here. He says, for example, that, he says Zig Heil, for example. He says that the Jews are inevitably in deep trouble. He says, I only have guests on after saying to myself, is this guest good for Jews? And if the answer is no, then I won't have the guest on. I've got pages and pages of these emails, Lewis, from Glenn Miller. That's one thing that's going on, okay? Number 2 is that Craig Cobb is apparently on a kind of hunger strike. He's not eating. He's refused food for several days. He said he's not protesting imprisonment, but he's just practicing a form of spiritual enlightenment called Mahasamadhi. And he is planning to leave his physical body behind, which is pretty interesting stuff for a black white supremacist to be doing after being arrested for walking around town with guns.
I am shocked that he's open to something that sounds like it's not American.
Lewis, aren't the Jews somehow responsible for Mahasamadhi and imposing it as a form of political correctness and multiculturalism or something?
Something like that. And I'm sure we'll be responsible for his death if he kicks the bucket due to starvation.
Well, but that's the thing. He's not going to die. He's just leaving his physical presence behind. And he's going to be, it's kind of like in Arthur C. Clarke's 2001 A Space Odyssey, where, I think his name, Dave Bowman, where Dave Bowman is able to essentially leave his body and become kind of like a star child. That's apparently what Craig Cobb, black white supremacist, is going to be doing. I want to be there for that. That sounds huge.
It sounds pretty incredible. Let's just hope he can't do more harm in that state of being.
Usually when I talk about right-wing media being all smoke and mirrors, it's kind of like a figure of speech, Lewis, but it turns out that it is literally true about Fox News. This is amazing. Fox News is literally using mirrors to make Mike Huckabee's audience look bigger. And there's a little bit of video here, and there was a segment on TBS's The Pete Holmes Show, which was highlighted by blogger Jim Romanesco. And comedian Noah Garfinkel said when he went to the Mike Huckabee show that there was a mirror that made the audience look twice as big. And there's actually, let me explain this as clearly as I can. I'm going to play 10 seconds of video for you where you see the mirror shake from the clapping, and it becomes completely obvious that the room is tiny. There's like 30 people in there, and it's literally smoke and mirrors, Lewis. Check this out.
Mr. President, I know you watch the show every week. Give me a call. We'll call.
Just unbelievable. Why can't they get a bigger crowd to just hang out at Huckabee's show? Like, if your show is so uninteresting to people that you can't even get more than 30 people to just walk in and sit there, shouldn't you be questioning whether that show should be part of your programming?
Well, I don't know. I guess that all depends on the ratings. It seems like this is just normal stuff for Fox News, and I don't know. Maybe it's a popular show.
What do you think is worse, being a retiree who's visiting New York and having to sit in the Huckabee audience, or being one of the Huckabee interns that has to go out on the street and invite people to come in for a taping?
I think the latter probably is worse.
Yeah. One of the funniest parts in Mike Huckabee's show, putting aside the fact that there's a mirror in the room meant to make the crowd look bigger, they'll do these cuts to the crowd clapping, and you can just tell, Lewis, that it's a jump cut. It's not a real cut. They've filmed the applause and then cut it in, and you can tell from the sound mixing, right, where Mike Huckabee will just be talking, and then it'll abruptly cut to clapping that is already kind of at its peak. You know how clapping typically crescendos, right? It starts low and it builds. There might be a couple hoots and hollers, and then it kind of stops as Huckabee starts talking. Huckabee talks, it cuts straight to the audience, and everybody is in a full clap, and then it cuts right back to Huckabee. It's so entertaining how that show is produced.
Yeah, it's incredible. And I wonder what percentage of the normal audience realizes that's going on, or if they even care. I don't know.
When Glenn Beck did his whole thing at the National Mall in Washington, D.C., he should have put in just gigantic mirrors to make it seem like there were, 15 million people there or something like that.
Why stop there? I mean, we've got computer-generated graphics, right? We can just create fake people, millions of them.
Why even do the thing at the National Mall? Just fake the entire thing and say there were 1 billion people there or something like that.
Hey, do it on Mars, too, while you're at it. Why not?
All right, we're going to take a break. Coming up next, a porn director and producer, Nika Noel, is going to be joining us again. She's been speaking at Columbia and Yale and drawing all sorts of controversy. I have a bunch of questions for her, mostly based on the emails we received in reaction to her first appearance about a year ago on the program. So that's next. We will have your voicemails. We will talk about what would you do if you were sitting in a hotel room and all of a sudden a bullet came through the wall from the adjacent room. We'll talk about that and much more. Glad you're with us today. DavidPakman.com/membership to become a supporter, get the bonus show, all that good stuff.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Joining me once again on the program is Nika Noel. She's a writer, producer, and director of straight, gay, lesbian, and transgender-oriented adult films. She was also recently honored as an industry game changer in adult video news. Nika, it's great to have you back, and I've been reading about your talks at Columbia and Yale here in the Northeast, and one of the topics that I found really interesting that was there that I want to get into with you is that of what is the effect of pornography broadly, and we can talk also more specifically on culture. We hear a lot about what's the effect of violence in video games and movies, and how does that translate into real world actions. And I think the same questions could be asked about sex and pornography. So let me first just make it the broadest question possible. How do you answer the question of the effect of porn? And then, you can get specific with the type of porn if you want, because I know that's a big thing, but the effect of porn on society.
I think that it's probably not true that that men are watching porn movies and thinking to themselves, gee, all women want to do pile driver, and they want to have me ejaculate in their face, and this is something that I should expect from women. This is something that I demand from women now that I've seen it in a porn movie. I think that's kind of ridiculous to think that men are that prone to suggestion. I certainly haven't found that to be true in my personal life. I think that that's probably one of those unfounded fears that people have, that if women are, quote, portrayed in this way, that men are going to think, well, this is the way that women should be treated. I don't think that there's really anything to indicate that that's true or that that's becoming a problem. One thing that I find interesting is that nobody talks about how badly men are objectified in porn movies. Nobody seems to be concerned about that. The fact that so often in porn movies, you don't even see the guy's face. He's not even depicted as a human being. I think men are far more objectified in porn movies than women are. They're just literally there to provide, their penis to the scene, which is mostly focused on the woman.
So simply to play devil's advocate with that, there are some who would hear you say that and say, look, the men are also objectified, and that, they're these detached bodies. They have no face, which is connected to they're not even really people. I think the counter to that would be, okay, that may be the case, but bear in mind that the majority of porn is produced for men, and that dynamic of not even including the man as a person may actually be a response to the desires of the men consuming the films. Could that argument not be made?
Well, I think that argument is made a lot, and as I've said before, I don't think that that is an accurate argument. I think that once we started getting feedback from men and from male viewers via the internet, whereas before they didn't have a way to give feedback about what they wanted to see and what they didn't, what they would prefer to see in their porn movies, we found that that is not what they wanted to see, that they did want to see more realistic sex, more realistic women. It's basically that's why I have a career. I mean, that's why my movies are selling. They're not all selling to women. I mean, I think I have more male fans than female fans. And what I've heard from men is that this is what they're really looking for. This is what they really want. So I think there was a perception that, I mean, here's the thing. We don't really understand our sexuality very well. We don't talk about it openly. So many people still won't even admit to liking porn or watching porn, don't really know what they like or why. And so I think there's been a lot of misconceptions about what men are looking for, what women like and don't like. It's still widely believed that women just want to see romance porn, that they just want to see, lovey-dovey hair blowing in the breeze type of stuff. And that's certainly not true. And women are making it clear that that's not true. So there's been a lot of stereotyping, there's been a lot of misconceptions, and we're just starting now to have a real dialogue, I think, via the internet about what we're really looking for, and we're finding that that men and women are not as different as we thought, or as some people want to keep insisting that they are.
Hey, Nika, is there somewhat of a double standard when it comes to, if we imagine a mainstream actor or actress saying, okay, instead of doing the typical, we're kind of alluding to sex in a film, we're going to actually have sex and it's going to be shown explicitly, putting aside for a second kind of issues of MPAA ratings and the logistics of that. Would society view that differently than they would someone who is a, quote, porn star? And if so, is that a double standard, or is it justified to see the two differently?
A little of both. I think that what bothers people a lot about porn, and this is something that's changing a little bit, is it's not necessarily the sex or the nudity, but the fact that a lot of the time there doesn't seem to be a lot of thought and artistry put into it. I think that people change their perspective very quickly when you present them with something that you obviously put a lot of thought and care and time into, and where the performers were obviously approaching it from the perspective of this being their art and this being work that they're proud to be doing and care about doing. State of mind is really everything, even with porn. And unfortunately, especially when gonzo porn became popular, there was this perception of porn just being people that, just kind of sleazebags with cameras that didn't really care about what they were doing, and it was just trying to show as much graphic nudity and explicit and shocking imagery as they possibly could. And I think that just that leaves people cold. Meaninglessness and artifice is something that that people don't generally respond to on a deep level. Obviously, they want to see something that that they can relate to, and that arouses something in them that that feels substantial. And a lot of porn doesn't do that. That's why now there's a lot of controversy about that movie. I think Blue is the Warmest Color, I think it's called, that has an explicit scene in it. Apparently, I haven't seen the movie yet. And there's a lot of talk about this. Is this a pornographic film? No, it's an art film. And I think you can say that it's an art film if there was thought put into it, if there's something specific that the director and the performers are trying to bring to the audience, and they put that kind of artistry and care into it, then it's no longer an argument about whether sex is good or bad.
All right, so much to talk about as always with you. We've been speaking with Nika Noel. She's a writer, producer, and director of straight, gay, lesbian, and transgender-oriented adult films. Nika, as always, we didn't get to everything, but we'll have you back and certainly talk about much more. Thanks for being on.
Thank you very much.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
I was looking at a list of the late November gun killings just to see if there was anything particularly egregious. What does it say about us as a society, Lewis, that looking at a list of gun killings by itself is not at all shocking because there's so many situations that we're kind of used to people dying from guns in? I was looking to see if there was a less common way that somebody was killed by a gun, and I actually did come across one. The Dallas News reports that a hotel guest was killed by a bullet that came through the wall from the next room. Apparently, a negligent discharge from another hotel guest that was cleaning his gun. The Dallas News article says that a guest at a hotel was fatally shot in front of her family when a bullet was fired from an adjoining room. It passed through the wall and struck her. Another hotel guest, 36-year-old Michael Shane Gray, faces a charge of criminally negligent homicide in the death of the 48-year-old woman named Tracy Reedy. Michael Gray was negligent in the way he handled the firearm, Irving police spokesman John Argumanes said. Hotel staff said that the woman was staying with her husband and teenage son at the Microtel Inn off of Airport Freeway and Beltline Road for about 2 weeks. They had some financial difficulties. 1 a.m, she's sitting there watching TV in bed, Lewis, shot in the chest by a bullet from the next room. Unbelievable. Her husband and son also in the room. They weren't hurt. They called 911. She was rushed to the hospital and sadly died from her injuries. This is just absolutely ridiculous. And yeah, it's an accident. The guy had no criminal history, was a responsible gun owner, responsible gun user, presumably, until this happened, you know? And it's just amazing to me when, you're just sitting there in a hotel. You're not even in the same, you have no guns. You've not let anybody into the room that has a gun. You've committed no crime. You're not even out at an ATM where somebody might want to rob you. You're just watching TV and a bullet comes through the wall and kills you.
Yeah. If you're cleaning your gun and it's loaded, you are a stupid, stupid person. And it's incredible that we need to worry about being shot even when the people who are holding the guns aren't trying to fire them. It's kind of scary.
On the complete other side of the gun discussion, Iceland police have shot a man dead for the first time ever. BBC is reporting this, and the police in Iceland shot a man dead who was firing a shotgun at them in his apartment in the early morning hours yesterday. It's the first time someone has been killed by an armed police operation in Iceland, according to officials. First, some tear gas canisters were thrown through the windows to try to subdue the 59-year-old, and that didn't work. This was in the capital city of Reykjavik, and police officers went in. They actually had to call out the special squad because the regular police don't even carry guns in Iceland. They have such low crime rates, and they called in the armed squad and did take the life of this man. They apologize. They indicate that they regret what happened. They extend the condolences to the family of the man. And they said the event is without precedent, Lewis. This has never happened before in the country of Iceland, which you have visited.
Right. I don't remember ever there being a discussion about guns or crime when I was in Reykjavik. But But of course, I was aware of the fact that they do have very low crime rates and almost no gun violence.
There is almost no violent crime at all. People are so relaxed that parents leave their children outside unattended. And the reasons, Lewis, that are cited are, number one, very few people on the extremes financially. Very few people see themselves as upper class, and very few people see themselves as lower class. 97% of those who live in Iceland identify as upper middle class, lower middle class, or working class. Also, very high gun ownership per capita, but very difficult to get guns. So interesting, in spite of having strong regulation on guns, a lot of people are still able to get guns, but very little gun crime, almost non-existent. And also, Lewis, very low drug usage. Usage of cocaine among 15 to 64-year-olds, only 0.9%, ecstasy 0.5%, amphetamines 0.7%. Altogether, leads to almost no violent crime at all. Let's bear in mind, 320,000 people live in the entire country of Iceland. The population of just Brooklyn, which is one of 5 New York City boroughs, is 8 times the population of Iceland.
Yeah, it is a very small country. And I guess in that way, perhaps easier to manage, perhaps easier to keep people happy. But being there, they do a lot of things right and the smart way. So I think clearly that has something to do with it.
Let's go to your voicemails. Our voicemail number is available to you 24 hours a day. Some people leaving a lot of messages lately, Lewis, as many as 10, 15, 20 a day. It is quite amazing how the voicemail line has just blown up recently. A lot of people have a lot to say. Here's one of those people leaving one voicemail this time. Take a listen.
Hey, Dave, you spoke recently about conspiracy theorists and the burden of proof.
Right.
It's definitely true that they do shift it to the other side constantly. And the fact of the matter is, take something like Sandy Hook. I mean, of course, we have an enormous amount of interviews, police reports, and I could go on and on and on to prove that this happened. I mean, that is all evidence. But conspiracy theorists, they will just straight up say that that is not evidence, that it all could be faked. So then when the subject of burden of proof comes up, they basically say, it's your burden too, because you haven't proven it.
Yeah, and there's another element you're forgetting, which is even more hypocritical, Lewis, which is conspiracy theorists will say that the evidence you're using to try to disprove their conspiracy is not valid evidence because the news media that is part of your evidence is complicit. The video, it's all part of the conspiracy. But at the same time, they use that same footage to further their own conspiracy theory. So hold on a second. That same evidence is no good to disprove the conspiracy theory, but you're basing your entire conspiracy theory on those same news clips. It doesn't really make much sense, does it?
No, at some point you have to factor in rationality, and a lot of conspiracy theorists simply leave that out.
All right, one more quick voicemail here. Let's take a listen.
Hi, Dave. This is Tom in Liverpool. Just saying, I always say, Merry Festivus. Have a good one. Bye.
Yeah. All right. Well, very interesting. Checking in from Liverpool there. I thought it was Happy Festivus, not Merry Festivus. I don't know, but I'll look into it and I'll deliver some kind of a ruling, Lewis. I don't know which it is.
I'm not sure either, but nice to know that there are Seinfeld fans keeping that alive.
We have an awesome bonus show coming up today. Lewis is hosting it. Lewis has produced it. DavidPakman.com/membership in order to become a supporter. We depend on your support and we give you tons of great perks. So we will see you on today's bonus show right after this.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.